Greetings. Welcome to the Dragon Con Urban Fantasy Track Buffy Watch for Season 6. We have a lot of things to talk about tonight. There are lots of opinions, both yay and nay, on this season. And I am not really sure how most of the folks on this panel feel about that, but we are going to find out tonight. And first thing we're going to do, though, is start by having my wonderful panelists introduce themselves. And Carol, we'll begin with you.
Hi, I'm Carol Stokes. I've been a fan of Buffy from day one, and I love coming on these panels.
We love having you. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Diana.
Hi. I didn't have cable when Buffy first came out, so I came in at season 6. My roommates finally got cable, and I was like ecstatic because I got to finally watch the show. Back in the day, we didn't have streaming, so I had to watch it out of order. But it hooked me. The musical episode really did it. It was the nail in the coffin of my becoming a fan, and now I'm trapped in this Buffy shaped coffin.
Well, that's actually a pretty good image in my head. Yeah, especially for this season. Marks.
Hey, I'm Mark Spile. I'm a filmmaker, podcaster, author, writer person, and and I've been a fan of Buffy since first premiered. Almost missed the premiere, but I just happened to catch it on television, and then I was hooked ever since. So, and I'm thrilled to be back on the panel.
Well, thank you. Now, you said you almost missed it. Does that mean that you were ready, that you just kind of came across it by mistake, or were you did the broadcast just come at the wrong time or something, and you almost missed it because of other stuff?
I was in college, I think, and so it wasn't completely on my radar. I mean, I'd heard some rumblings about it, and then I was home and I switched TV channels, and they're like, coming up next, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm like, what? I can't miss this. So almost missed it.
So that was the beginning. Okay. All right. Yep. Daviar.
Hey, gang. Daviar Snipes here, theater actor, voice actor, now living in Canada, despite what my sweater says. Formerly of Atlanta, born and raised in Georgia, now in Canada. Watched Buffy ever since season 2 originally, and I have a long and complicated history with season 6, and I can't wait to get into it.
I love that, long and complicated. Mm-hmm. And Jean.
Well, I feel like
our mystery woman. Yes.
Yeah, I'm a mystery woman tonight. I have to explain. I'm not in my usual home. I'm kind of on vacation, so I'm doing this for my daughter. And this is actually her artist studio. And there's another light up here, but I can't figure out how to turn it on. So I'm just going to be in shadow, which is kind of appropriate for Buffy anyway, especially for this season, I think. But I'm Jean Stein, and I'm a writer, and I'm a huge Buffy fan, and I came late to the party because it was over long before I actually got involved, and it was because of Carol Malcolm that that I got to kind of bonded with her over Buffy, and I've loved this show ever since, and I still do. And even watching this series, which I thought was another very hard season to watch, it's just some of the best television ever. And I don't know why that isn't emphasized more than it is. That it's great television, great characters, great storylines, and I'm a diehard Buffy fan for sure. Yeah. I don't want to see this end.
You what?
I don't want to see this end.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean. Well, you'll be at con, so I have we'll have a couple of Buffy panels going on. So
good.
Yeah, lots of fun. Now, I will say that yes, I'm one of those like Marks who watched it from day one, and I back then I was getting my TV guide. Because people might not, realize that, there really wasn't any such thing as social media back then. I mean, there was the internet, that there was not really social media to really promote a lot of these things. But yes, so I've been a fan from the beginning, and my track at Dragon Con took over covering the show in 2017 because there used to be a Whedon track, and that so Buffy was covered there as well as all the other Whedon properties. But what they did at Con was they eventually wanted to uh, take away all of the uh, like a single creator track, so that they would be combined with other things. It makes room for other stuff to go on. So uh, I can tell you that was probably one of the most excited I've been, was when I got the word that I was going to be covering this show. That really it made my week, month, year at that time. So in any case, I just thought I would mention that. But when we talk about season 6, I know a lot of people have a lot of very negative things to say about it. And I, I just wanted to preface that by saying that I used to wonder why, but after watching it this way, watching essentially the whole season over the course of a month, there you didn't have those little breaks in between, and I realized how really rough. I mean, not that I didn't know it anyway, but I'm just saying it kind of brings it in, uh, making me see where maybe some people who did watch it that way from the beginning, whereas I did not, that's why maybe they had that attitude. Because I know some people didn't watch it until it was available on DVD back when Netflix was DVDs, and before there was streaming. So, but if they've seen it, for those of us who had to wait a week before the next one came out, and that kind of thing, it was, there was all this anticipation. So my first question for the panel is going to be the same that it always is. Did you have some favorite episodes, or particular scenes that you really enjoyed? And was there one episode that you just said, yeah, we could have done without that, and it didn't really contribute to the narrative of the show during this season? But I will also say that we will have a discussion about Once More with Feeling by itself. So it's fine for you to go ahead and mention that, but we'll talk about that one at length, because obviously it's going to be on everybody's favorites list. I mean, if it's not, don't tell me. Anyway, Carol, we'll start with you.
Well, of course, Once More with Feeling. But putting that aside for now, I particularly loved Tabula Rasa, where Willow has done the amnesia spell and they all wake up and they don't know who they are, and they're trying to figure out clues, and Spike thinks he's Randy Giles.
Yeah, he was like, what's wrong with you?
There's a lot of humor in that episode. And yet people, even without knowing who they are, they're kind of sussing out some of their relationship. Buffy feels very protective towards Dawn. Willow and Tara are very attracted to each other. Anya and Giles know they're connected somehow, and they think it's because they're engaged, which is like so wrong that it's hilarious. There's just so much, a lot going on, but there is a lot of humor mixed in with it. Of course, the undercurrent is just that Willow has done a really terrible thing and ends up paying for it at the end. But it's just so deftly done that I really love that one. And probably heartbreakingly close would be Hell's Bells, which is just a heartbreaker of an episode. But again, so deftly done, balancing humor where they're trying to play charades because the wedding is delayed. and deal with all of the demon guests, and Xander's family, and the wiggling wedding gift with the tentacles.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But at the same time, it's heartbreaking because Xander has this enormous crisis of faith, and in the end, the wedding doesn't come off. And this is just really, I think, one of Whedon's fortes, where he can balance those light and dark elements so real. In watching all of season 6, preparing for this, I really hadn't watched it like as much as, say, seasons 1 through 3. And I really have to, my byline for season 6 is shit gets real.
Yeah. That's good.
We take a whole left turn from where we've been. And so, yes, it's a darker season, but nonetheless, there is a lot of humor to be mined, and it's there. And so those 2 episodes in particular, I really, really enjoyed. The episode I could have lived without would be Double Meat Palace.
Yeah.
I mean, the snakehead lady is like maybe mildly amusing, and who doesn't enjoy a little Soylent Green humor? I've pulled that gag myself, not in the
Yeah,
middle of a
right,
fast
right.
food restaurant, but who doesn't like that great tagline? It's people, uh,
Right.
but it's just so. Even people who have been through the fast food mill when they were teenagers don't want to watch this, because it's just so there's nothing. There's just nothing. There's no meat in this
Right.
episode.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
that's
that might
something
be
I
part
coulda
of the
lived
point,
without.
but good
It's
idea.
hilarious.
Diana, what about you?
Okay, so I have to disagree with Carol about Double Meat Palace. I was working 3 different jobs at that point, and one of them was in the food service. So I was right there in the thick of things with much thinner patties. And so my take on it was, wow, this is a show about supernatural people and this really powerful character who's running around fighting demons, and she still has to make sure there's a roof over her head and take care of the bills with a job at a burger joint. And of course, she sees something wonky. Of course, she notices stuff and suspects something. It's the most natural thing in the world for the character to do at this point. I appreciated that when you have a character in a fantasy setting and who's accustomed to fantasy and accustomed to horror and accustomed to monsters and fighting them, that the first reaction they have to being dissatisfied or frustrated or angry with what they're doing day in, day out is to respond as though it must be something evil. It must be something demonic.
Right.
It must be something, because I wouldn't be this miserable if it wasn't.
Yeah.
Surely, if any mundane person can handle working in a place like this, and I think there's something wrong with it, it must be some horror from somewhere that I need to stop. Right? And then it turns out, oh, the episode itself, like the resolution is so, yeah, it's hinky, but it's hinky in a very mundane way. It's so banal, and it's such a contrast. And that again was, I watched this season before I watched any of the rest of the show, and this was one of the things, that juxtaposition is one of the things that hooked me. So this was my second favorite episode, but Once More with Feeling is my first, and I know we're discussing that later, so I was going to just mention Double Meat Palace.
Okay, well, that's a very nice defense. We have 2 different opinions on Double Meat Palace. Marks, your turn.
So Once More Feelings is my favorite this season. It's one of my favorites of the whole series, and then also the Amnesia episode, like Carol said, is also my next favorite, and it's just hilarious just seeing them get it so wrong. Playing out of character. Reminded me of Band Candy, like a new spin on Band Candy episode. I do have to say that I don't know if it's one of my favorites, but I do like Double Meat. And I did work at fast food for a little bit, so I do relate to that. And it is very much like I guess like a Peter Parker thing. Buffy has to figure out, how she's going to pay the bills too and fight the demons and stuff. Which I don't know. I would be like charging the watchers or something. Like, come on, guys, you got to pay me something salary here.
Right. Yeah. The council should be coming through. Yeah.
But I appreciate that episode. I love that. Again, they put a twist in there where you think maybe that it is people or something, but no, it's not. And play for expectations.
Not even meat.
It's not even meat. Oh my gosh. So those are some of my favorites. This season, it was really dark, as I'm sure a lot of you are going to say, and so it was a little rough to watch. It's a rough season for me to rewatch, just because it's a little bit draining because of that. Except the musical, a few key episodes I love going back to over and over again. Right. It's so ironic in a way. I guess it was the high point before we went really dark.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my general take. Season 6.
Okay, Devior.
Yeah, season 6 is a monster because we just talked about my favorite season, which was season 5, and season 5, even though it ends in Buffy's death, is still such, I think, a triumphant season, and it has such a triumphant ending still because she dies for the greater good, and it's a willing sacrifice. And to kind of go into this season after that, where everybody is just put through the ringer. And I think it's heavier than dark. It is just, the season just lives in despair and almost in like this sense of just torturous. It is like, let's take the worst things that the characters can go through and let's put them through it and then add a layer on top of that. Buffy's relationship with Spike, which is so toxic and just destructive, and Willow going to the dark side. Actually, one of my favorite episodes from the season is actually Wrecked, because it's so interesting to see Willow's transition into this season. And I also think and to see Willow become the villain of the season. And for me, the best villain in Buffy, yes, topping Angel, yes, topping any of the Master, all of that. I think Dark Willow is the greatest Buffy villain, and it's one of those things that I think season 6 has such a bar that it sets. And I said at the beginning, I have a complicated history with this. Like every time I've watched season 6, I kind of have a different response to it. There was one time I thought it was the second best season of Buffy, still behind season 5, and then I thought it was one of the worst seasons. And now rewatching it now, I think I've kind of scooted it back up to maybe at least in the top 3 seasons, because I think what it does is so daring and brave. So, and also before I toss it over to Jean, something for me that's very personal is, this aired in 2001 initially, and I was living in New York at the time. And for episode 1 to have aired about 3 or 4 weeks after 9/11, and that was such a dark time, just particularly living in New York for the city and just what we were going through, to have this season be so reflective of just what I was personally going through and what the city and the country in a lot of ways was going through. It gave this season such a resonance that I still feel to this day every time I watch it. So again, there's a lot of complications and personal connection to this season in a lot of ways. So it'll be fun to talk about it some more.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting perspective to be looking at it from. I hadn't thought about that in terms of the year that it actually came out, but that makes a lot of sense and may explain a few things too. Jean.
Well, of course, I'm with everyone else. I love Once More with Feeling, but I also really liked episode 3 because in my mind, episode 3 really sets up what happens in Once More with Feeling, because in episode 3, that's the episode where Buffy is speaking with Spike at the end. And she said that she thought she was in heaven. And then, and she got pulled back, but that her friends could never know that because they thought she was in a hell dimension, and that's why they brought her back. But so I thought that the last part of that episode 3, gives me goosebumps every single time I watch it, because here she's speaking with Spike, and Spike's face. James Marsters is wonderful. His face just reflects all of his thoughts, and watching his face when she's saying, I think I was in heaven, and it almost makes me tear up every time I think about that. I also liked Hell's Bells, and I'll tell you why I liked Hell's Bells, because I think Anya showed such grace in that episode. I mean, the end of the episode when she's walking up the aisle by herself, it's just, I mean, it just kind of tears your heart out. She doesn't know, she has no idea what happened, why he ran away. He never indicated that he didn't want to get married, and it was just, so that's always been one of my favorite episodes too, because Anya shows such grace in that episode, so I really liked it. Probably my least favorite was Double Meat Palace too. I mean, at the end when Buffy feeds the head into the grinding machine, it just like it really produced a gag reflex in me. I thought, oh God, we could have done without that last scene. But anyway, but I know we're going to talk more about it. But there's so much. It just as Devler said, there's so much in this season. I mean, it's just it has everything. It has pathos. It has drama. It has humor. It's just it's just a wonder to me. It's just a wonder. This season is terrific. Carol.
Okay. Well, we have a comment here from Renita. Hi, Renita. Thank you for joining us. I can agree that Dark Willow was the best villain in Buffy. I always remember her going after the trio, ruthless, understandably so, but ruthless.
Yes.
Yeah, that's and even though if you've seen the show before, and you know what's coming, when you know what's coming in a particular episode, you kind of put it off. That's like when I knew that I was going to be, that was the night for watching Seeing Red. I was like, oh God, I'm gonna have to go through that again, and all of that. But one of the things that I've tried to do and we've mentioned this, I think before, we've talked about this briefly, is that and this is not the first rewatch of the whole series that I've done, but it's the first time I've rewatched the whole series in probably 5 years, something like that. And yeah, I think that's right. Just one right after the other, or one a month or whatever. But in any case, one of the things I try to remember sometimes is what was my reaction the first time I saw this episode, because because it was a long time ago. When it comes down to it, I mean, the show premiered, it was 25 years ago. So, when you think back, okay, what was it? How did I feel 20 years ago when I saw this happen? And I can remember specifically with Seeing Red. And I remember thinking, that's the first time Amber Benson appears in the credits, or in the, the opening credits, that she's got full cast credits. And I thought, oh, good, finally. And then at the end of the episode, and I was like, they couldn't have done that. I remember my youngest son was in college at the time. And I remember we talked on the phone after that. And I was like, can you believe she can't be dead? Certainly they're going to bring, and anyway, but I do, I tried. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Just to add on to that, at the end of season, at Seeing Red, not only is Tara dead, but I tell you, having to wait a week when Willow looks up and her eyes turn red, having to wait a week originally to see what the hell was going to happen with that was excruciating. I remember that. To your point about thinking what I felt originally, that will always stick with me.
Yeah. No, I agree. So, and we've talked in past, on past panels for Buffy Watch about some of the different characters, and just my question for you guys is: have your feelings or attitude towards any of the characters in particular? Did you have they changed? Did this particular season kind of put a twist on things for you? And in how you felt about a particular character. And Diana, we'll start with you.
Oh my God. So at the beginning of this season, I was like, oh, Xander's like this regular dude and he's like devoted to his fiance and that's cute and I like it. And then I'm like, why is he doing this? What happened?
Yeah.
What's his problem? And like, I just went from, here's this regular dude who's out here putting himself on the line with these other people and helping where he can. And, you think he's like this decent stand-up guy. And then it's like, what? And there were like very small hints of it in the earlier seasons, but at that point, he's also in high school still. And so you're like, okay, he's a high school kid, but then like he's an adult now. He's grown up. He doesn't have this excuse anymore. What is his freaking problem? And it's like I started to think, every dude in this season is like crappy. It definitely like was very much like it with the exception of Giles, every male character was crap.
Wow, there you go, everybody. You've heard it here.
So I just, I was like, Xander too? What? And I swear, like one of my roommates used to make fun of me over that because it's like Xander too, right? Like every time some guy in real life turned out to be like crappy, and I was like, oh, Xander too, right?
Yeah.
So I just, that was definitely a changing opinion there was
For
about
you,
him.
it was Xander. Okay. Yeah. Marks.
Yeah, I think, one of the themes is them transitioning to adults. I know they transitioned to college last season, but now I think they're transitioning to adulthood and dealing with hardships and tough choices. And I think Xander failed probably, in this, because his fear of becoming his father, I think just made him like his father, right? Because what did he start doing as soon as they broke up? He started drinking and getting mad and everything. Whereas I think whenever it was even more pronounced this time around watching it, I really see that Xander and Anya really made each other better when they were together and stuff. And Anya still stays, I think, in that growth, maturity in a way after that. Even though she kind of was going to slip as a vengeance demon, but she still is, sticking around, helping him out and being responsible. So I think it was a mistake for Xander to do that, especially the way he did. And then he gets all jealousy and he's like, oh, Spike, oh yeah, gosh, Buffy, how could you? Anya, oh, you slept with Spike, ooh, I hate you now. It's like, even though I left you to altar, that's that jealousy Xander thing I always hated with that character. So it was unfortunate what they did with Xander, and he didn't really ever get to really make it up in this season either, I don't think. I mean, okay, he saved the world, but he didn't make it up to Anya.
I'm sorry, but saying I remember you from our crayon breaky days does not make up for just the jackassery he pulled.
I'm pretty sure if Giles magic
but the result is Willow listening to him. So
in the end,
I think if it didn't have the magic to make him her more in touch of her emotions, that wouldn't have worked. I'm sure. I would think. But yeah. So those are two characters. I think they did a lot of growth and change with them, and I'm disappointed what Xander did, and they never really 100%. I don't even know if next season I think they just kind of move on. But I just feel like I don't know. It was disappointing, Xander. Bad Xander.
Okay, I think he was disappointed in himself too.
I think so too. Yeah.
Daviar.
So, which character did my opinions of change? Right?
Yeah. Was there a character whose that your opinion of them has kind of changed, or your attitude towards that? Just how you felt about a particular character. Is there one that went through a change during this season?
I don't know. I think I got to give it to Warren. I think Warren to me is kind of in the Caleb season 7 preview coming, in the Caleb vein, where he was not the main villain, but I think just as impactful and one of those memorable kind of side villains. I don't know, and I think how he becomes more evil over the course of the season, because I think it just starts out as this, hey, he's just an a-hole geek who's just trying to, but how villainous he becomes to
Right.
where rape, murder, all of it is on the table, and he just has no emotions towards it. I mean, they really write like one of like the best monsters and that in his character, and that's this monster was just a human being, a young kid actually, is I think was just really well done. So I think my opinion of Warren and kind of just the scope of that character changed, and I think it just makes me appreciate that character a little better.
Yeah, because when we first see him in season 5 with the whole bot thing, with his girlfriend, I forget her name, April, I think it was, and
Katrina.
yeah, and that he's that was creepy. Let's face it, doing that, that he was able to do that or whatever, that was creepy. But then, yeah, he seriously went from creepy to about as bad as you can get. So
Yeah, I mean, he's basically an incel, right? Before incels was a term.
yeah, exactly. Before that was the term, he was the perfect example. Jean, what about you?
Well, I think there are two characters, and I tried to, when I watched this season, to pretend like I had never seen it before. So I'm trying to experience it as if it was for the first time. So I didn't think ahead to what was happening, what was going to happen. But the two characters to me that changed, in my opinion, so much were Dawn, because Dawn, became so self-centered, and I understand, and she had probably every right to be. I mean, she has a superhero for a sister who's always busy and always gone, and and nobody ever stays around her. Everybody takes off. Everybody has their job to do except Dawn. But when she started stealing things, that kind of caught me unawares. I was kind of surprised at that she would do that. But I guess teenagers just act out. They all act out in one way or another. So Dawn, and also Dawn felt more than any of the other ones, I think, any of the characters, that Buffy didn't want to be here, that she was not happy that she was brought back. And I think she realized it probably first and felt it more than anybody else. And the other character is Spike, because when you first see Spike leave, all he says is, "I'm going to give the bitch what she wants." And you don't know what that means. You don't know what that means.
Right.
So he takes off, and you don't know till the very, very end that he's gone to get his soul back. So he goes through all of this. I mean, he is so in love with Buffy that he wants to, he gives up his life. He gives up his life as he knows it, because he's so in love with Buffy that he will do anything to try to be worthy of her. So Dawn and Spike are the two characters to me that, as I said, not knowing what's going to happen in the future, just watching it as if I was watching it for the first time. Those are two characters that I really had no idea what was going to happen to them until the end. So,
okay, Carol.
They all go through so much. I mean, they really all go through the mill, one way or another, and come out the other side certainly more battered. As a side character, I was really taken aback by Jonathan getting sucked into so much of the trio stuff, because we saw him in high school and he had his weaknesses, but in the end he was like, okay, and he respected Buffy and stuff. And somehow he got caught up in this. Yeah. Although at least even by the end, he's the one pulling back, and he's the one who tells Buffy, he's got the magic orbs and everything. So he kind of, redeems himself a bit and we see him that he is in fact out of place with the other two. But when you first see him really in there with the trio, you're kind of like, wow, Jonathan, what happened to you? I'm going to say a word for Xander. They've laid the groundwork for Xander and his horrible family since season 1.
Right. Yeah, they're
always had how horrible his family is, how much he's like he tries to stay away from them and sleeps in his yard and everything. So while we see it really up close and personal in Hell's Bells, we've seen that for the previous 5 seasons, that he has nothing to base a family, any kind of model of a happy family on. And do I think he did the right thing? Of course not. Leaving someone at the altar is horrible. I mean, they should have dealt with this before, and so forth. I totally am down with that. But I do at least feel for him that he was spinning and didn't know how to get out of it, didn't know how to deal with it. He didn't want to lose the most precious thing he has, which is Anya, and he knows it. But he also couldn't picture when he's presented with those horrible scenes, which, let's admit, they're horrible.
Right.
Presented with those images. And again, let's also just mention how fabulously well done that was. Emma Caulfield is just like, spot on perfect in her various, aging incarnations there. But when he's already has nothing to go on, is watching his family act out in horrible ways on this that's supposed to be the happiest day of his life, and then is shown this is what your future is going to be, that was a tough road to hoe. And I won't say he handled it the best way possible, but I do at least feel for him in being so damaged that he didn't know what to do, and he didn't feel he had any recourse.
Like I just had a lot of hope from his character from the get-go.
Absolutely.
That you can go past something like that and get beyond that. That it was such a letdown and a gut punch for me.
It is a letdown. It's a terrible letdown. But I feel let down with him because he didn't make it. Like his fingers were scrabbling on that cliff, and they crumbled out from under him. So I guess I just feel for not only, I feel horrible for Anya, but I also feel horrible. They all lost. Like they all lost. But I don't feel he did it like maliciously. He just was like,
I think what really drove Xander over the edge too was at the end of that, when he raised that pan, he was going to kill Anya. He was going to hit Anya. And I think that
he couldn't face the fact that he would have been capable of doing that.
Right,
absolutely.
Exactly,
and he would do anything not to do that. Yeah, I think that's a point. But so I feel like Jonathan, but they all went through it. We saw Buffy crash and burn. We saw Willow crash and burn, although we saw her start coming back from it, but then she really crashed and burned. They all just really had their struggles, which is just what makes this season so much darker than a lot of them.
Yeah.
And
who didn't struggle? Clem. Clem did great.
I love Clem and his little chip tasting test.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Yeah. And here's Renita's comment about the past seasons have hinted at Willow's dark side. Mm-hmm. This season, you really see her subtly start slipping, and it was interesting to finally see it happen. I agree. I mean, I even made notes in my notebook. I made little comments next to it that, you can see here, there are these subtle changes, even just at the very beginning of the season, like in the first couple of episodes. And when she tells Giles, well, if maybe you better not piss me off. I mean, that just kind of, stops you in your tracks when you think about Willow, saying that to Giles.
I feel like in the first time we saw this all live, we were just kind of like, wow, Willow's getting a little sassy there, but of course now on a rewatch, when we know what's coming, we're like, oh yeah, here it was. They were really foreshadowing this, but we're in blissful ignorance,
Right. And when the first time, yes. Now we are going to talk about Once More with Feeling, which, at the time was a groundbreaking and very influential episode of television. And I would argue that I don't think there's been much of anything that has had the same kind of impact since. I think, a few other shows have tried to do it. The Magicians did a couple of episodes that they weren't musicals in quite the same way, but they had musical numbers and they were great. There was a whole show, the Zoe and the Extraordinary Playlist, which, was very well done. But I really feel as though, nothing really compares to, this episode of this show. And did anybody else on the panel happen to have the CD that they played all the time of the sound? Anybody else?
Yep.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I did. I still have mine. And I actually, where did that go? Oh, I've got something across the room, which I'll go and get in a minute. But yeah, what I wanted to ask each of you is, what are some of your favorite aspects of this episode? What to you makes it particularly special? And, and is it because of the way that it fits with the rest of the, with the rest of the season, or, that it fits in the show so well? What in particular about it is something that really speaks to you? And Marks, you get to go first.
Yeah, I think it was groundbreaking. I don't think we'd have the Magicians musical, the Lucifer musical episode, the Flash Supergirl musical crossover. I don't think any of those would have happened if it weren't
Legacies
for Buffy.
had one.
Oh yes, Legacies, yeah. And I think the reason why this one stands out so much more, because those are all good in their own ways, but the reason why this one stands out, besides being one of the first, is I think it's because it's all original music. A lot of them don't have original music, or they're doing remixes and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think they spend a lot of time crafting the choreography, the dance numbers, other stuff, to really showcase each character and their character arcs, and foreshadowing a lot of stuff for the rest of the season, really. And kind of move the story forward, especially with Giles deciding he needs to leave, and and with Buffy, reveal, about Buffy's feelings and stuff about coming back, and that getting revealed to her friends and such. So it moved this plot forward. It wasn't just like a standalone episode that didn't affect anything. Original music that really, there's a lot of like bunnies, the bunnies lines. There's a lot of little character things. Yeah, lots of comedy and drama mixed and matched, and everything. We put a spell on me. Then it comes back and it has a whole twisted meaning now when she realizes mind control or something. Willow's doing something else to her.
No metaphor now. It's an actual.
No. Yeah. So, all that and the dance numbers and everything, and playing with that, I think it was just so well done. It's really, really hard to top because of that. So even though like I like the Lucifer one, I've watched that multiple times, but it's just a remix of existing music and stuff. And I think there's something about going that extra mile to actually, especially since this show doesn't have that talent, where it never dives into this, to be able to do it so well was really outstanding. And everybody sings really well except for Willow. That actress didn't want to sing.
I think these lines are mostly filler. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is what I wanted to show you. This is a vinyl that it was actually one of my volunteers gave it to me.
Nice.
Wow.
That's great.
And it's got somewhere, but it's in another room. I think I put it with some other stuff. There's a playbill that came with it and everything. So that's pretty cool.
Wow.
Okay, Daviar, what's your take?
Well, Marks, don't, you mentioned Willow. Don't leave out Dawn either, because Michelle Trachtenberg didn't really have an awesome, singing moment either. But, by design, she only wanted to dance, according to the commentary. I will say that, yeah, this is a great episode. I think the two things that make it stand out for me is one, the different musical styles that it plays with throughout, the different genres of music, because I think, the best musicals are able to take these different flavors of music and put them all together to make this great whole of a piece. Because you kind of get like the Disney opening with going through the motions. Spike, of course, rest in peace, gives us a rock song, and then of course we get like the tap dance number with Sweet solo. So you kind of have all these different flares that I think not only fit each of the characters, but Mark said it best. I think for me is that what separates this from the other musicals is that this was just another way to push the story forward and the characters forward. It wasn't just something to just stop and do just for the heck of it. It was really a valuable piece of storytelling, because if, being the musical theater person that I am, it's people saying, because I have something so emotional that just to speak it is not strong enough. So we have to eventually reveal to the group that Buffy was in heaven and not hell. So what better way to do that than in a musical number where this is so emotional for her? The only way she can say this to her friends is that it's forced out through song. So it's like that is the only way we can sensibly have this moment. So I think the way they used it to just further tell the story, I think it just showcases how brilliantly written this show was, because that's where other shows I think that tried this stunt for them, where it comes up short. So yeah, those are the two things I'll shout out to.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Jane.
Yeah, I agree with everything Davler said, and I think one of the and I think this is correct, but actually too, this is the first time that when after Buffy says she's thought she was in heaven, and she starts this dancing, this crazy dancing, and she's spinning around and around and around, and it's Spike that stops her. Spike stops her and says, "No, you have to go on living. You have to go on living," because it was like she wanted to combust. She just wanted to go away, get it over with. And then at the end, see again, Spike. I think he's so instrumental in this season, because at the beginning when this thing is going on, he says he's not going to follow him to the Bronx. He's not going to go with him, and then all of a sudden he goes. He's there. He has to go where Buffy is. That's just all there is to it. And when Buffy leaves, and her last thing is, I think, I just want to feel, and she's following Spike. She follows Spike off. So I think it's kind of the beginning of when Spike and Buffy start to connect, which Buffy denies all the, during the whole rest of the season. But there's a real connection there. And I don't know if the DVD, if you have the DVD set, there's a special about the making of this episode that was after the episode, after it was all over. And I'm just so, I don't know, in awe of Joss, because he comes up with these wonderful, fantastic, off the wall ideas that work. And I think it's because he knows the character so well. He knows his character so well, and he can spin these wonderful stories around him. And I just think this is one of the best episodes ever too. I'm in that camp. And I even like the one where the whole town is saying, he got the mustard out, or they got the mustard out.
Buffy opens the door. Yeah, somebody in the magic box is like, well, is it just us? Because if it's just us, that's probably some kind of a spell. And she opens the door, and the mustard, and she's like, yes, not us.
That was writer David Fury. So we got the little cameo of Mari Noxon and the other side.
And Anya, of course, says it has to be bunnies. Has to be bunnies because they're just evil. But
it could be bunnies.
I don't think we could. I think we could probably talk about this episode alone for an entire program, and not touch on everything, because it's wonderful. And I swear there is not another television show that I have ever seen before or since that gets me the way Buffy gets me. There's just something about it. You just connect with the characters, and you feel. And again, that's Joss. That's Joss. He's just an amazing creator, and I wish I had a little pinky of his talent. So,
Oh, you have plenty of talent of your own, my dear. Carol, what about you? What was special to you about the episode?
Well, certainly, I mean, we've touched on the whole fact that the songs are not simply just presented, but they're integral to the story. They're integral to moving the story itself along. Each song reveals things and thoughts about each character's, inside struggle. Um, they sing these things despite themselves. They don't
yeah.
even want to sing these things. And as they learn about how this is happening, they start to try and resist. Xander and Anya don't want to sing their song because they're the things they don't want to tell each other. Like her toes are hairy and he has beady eyes. Spike doesn't want to sing about how helpless he is about loving Buffy. So they don't even want to sing these things, but yet they can't help it. They must sing under the spell that's what comes out. Of course, Sweet himself, it's a brilliant cameo. He is just stunning in his brief time on screen. Obviously, the man is just like radiating talent everywhere. And so that alone helps elevate everything that we're seeing. And I think the fact that these are not, outside of like Anthony Head and Amber Benson, these are not singers. And yet they all worked so hard. Sarah Michelle Gellar didn't want to sing. She wasn't going to sing. They were going to use a double. And then when she saw the songs, she's like, well, I have to sing them because they're too important to my character. I can't hand that off to somebody. I have to do it. And made herself take the lessons and practice and everything so she could do it. Yeah. So, the amount of effort that they all personally put in shows, and the dedication shows, even if you're not looking at it going, wow, look at her really. It's so beautifully woven together between their performances, what they're singing, why they're singing, what it leads them to. It's just an incredible, marvelous, entity. And that's why other shows, when they try to do it, it's like Daviar said, it's a stunt. Yeah, we've got some guys who sing and we're going to put in some cool songs and it's going to be really funny, but that's not what happened here. What happened here was this organic composition between, the writer and the actors and everything and the characters, and it has yet to be duplicated, really.
Yeah, agreed. Diana.
Davior said some really amazing things that I agree with wholeheartely. I also have a bit of a theater background. One thing I wanted to mention were the dances. Really, dancing is very important in musical theater as well, because I've had directors tell me that the first level of emotion is dialogue, and then on top of that is singing by itself, and then on top of that is dancing, and then the pinnacle is singing and dancing at the same time. And we definitely get plenty of that, especially in the high point emotions. So I know people have spoken to how amazing it is that the story was conveyed through the music instead of the music being an accessory to the story. And I think that's very important, but also the fact that they managed not only to get the story out that way, but to arrange things in such a way that the emotional high points came during a song and dance number instead of just a song or just a dance. That was very big. And then also the use of reprises, like Mark's said before, where we had Tara and Giles kind of coming at the situations that they're in with fresh eyes in their second, their medley with that their songs were together, and they're both along the same theme. And that's very Broadway. I really appreciated it at the time, and I still do all these years later. As problematic as the Spike and Buffy romance is, because I really feel like he took advantage of her from a traumatized space. I really don't feel like there's that's I know everybody will admit that it's toxic, but I found, he's a vampire with no soul. He was predatory toward her, downright predatory. And even with that, the musical episode sort of really drives home that Buffy's motivation for, even though she won't admit it, staying involved with him comes from this sort of heightened potential that she might have seen in that emotional moment, that maybe the musical episode is what drove her to stay with him longer than she should have. And I find that very interesting from a standpoint of, well, why does this person stay in a situation of domestic abuse? Because there's this desire to see some sort of potential or some sort of good in the person, because you had this moment, because you had this emotion. But that's not all there is. It's a house of cards. And I really feel like the musical episode kind of just nailed that so utterly as a theme. Like, I always go back to it. It's really amazing.
Okay. Well, it seems to me, and that there are other themes that we have come across in the season as well, but certainly loss and addiction are a couple that we see within this season. And how do you feel that those, or that one or the other of those, if you want, were handled? I mean, did you connect with that? Feel that it was done effectively? Just what's your reaction to that? And Davior, you go first.
That's a great question, Carol, because I think those themes, you're welcome. I think those themes are what has taken me on this roller coaster in my affinity for season 6. Because I think for those characters to go through what they did in season 6, when we've like well established who these folks are, and just Buffy being, I think what is so tragic, and Diane, I'm so thankful for a lot of what you said about Buffy and Spike's relationship, because I do think, particularly watching it this time around, is much to your point. I see how Spike takes advantage of where Buffy is at that point. And I think that, that helps you, reminds you that, oh yeah, this is a demon. But I think how it's handled, and the hero in Buffy, who no matter what she's faced has always been able to stand strong and overcome, drops so low in this relationship to like, this is what she has to have in order to connect to something. And to see Willow have this abrupt change from what Jonathan says, like she wore like, well, like she packed her own lunches and wore whatever shoes she wore, and look at her now she's coming to kill us. And it's just, I think how to use those themes for these characters at this point in the run of the show, when we think we know them so well, it was gut wrenching. I like, this is amazing to kind of see these characters go through this at this point. So I think it was an effective way to show growth in the characters by putting them through the worst. But again, I think that, the interesting thing of it is that we'll talk about it eventually soon. But I think season 7 kind of suffers because of how much work this season does. So yeah, I'll say I think that's why those themes work so well.
Okay, Jean.
Okay, well, I think Buffy took advantage of Spike. I'm sorry, I look at it a completely different way. Buffy took what she needed from Spike at the time. He was hopelessly in love with her. I'm sure she knew that, but I think Buffy was as addicted to Spike as maybe Spike was in love with Buffy. So, and Willow definitely went through all of the, now I have to say, I have to back up here a minute too, because I haven't, I don't think, been addicted to anything. I'm not sure. Chocolate, maybe. I was told. Are we addicted to
We're addicted to Buffy. That's our
I'm
addiction.
addicted to
I was going to say, yeah.
Well done, Mike.
But Willow seemed to me to go through all of the steps of addiction. I mean, she denied that she was addicted. She, said she could go without it. It wasn't necessary. And yet, even when she's promised Tara to go for a week without magic, she does that forgetful spell so that Tara will forget that she was mad at her. And
Right. She'll forget that she said she was going to go
exactly. So yeah. So I guess, and I think I've forgotten the question. What was the question about?
Well, just do you think that they handled the themes of loss and addiction well?
Yes, I do think they handled those themes very, very well. And I thought something just ticked the back of my mind too when we were talking about the last question. The song that Xander and Anya sang, "I'll Never Tell," was almost like a foreshadowing of what was going to happen, because they're both talking about things that they really aren't sure of or might not like about the other person, but will never tell each other. And Xander, that in that song, says that he's not sure about what's going on and all this stuff, but he just knows that he loves her, and that's enough at the time for him. But yeah, okay, that's it.
Okay,
I'm done.
Carol?
Yeah, well, Willow is certainly the classic addiction story, yes, where she, succumbs, she denies, she succumbs even more, and falls in with Amy, and Amy takes her to like that seamy, magic guy to juice her up and stuff, and all of that stuff. So that's the very classic addiction story. But yeah, I think Buffy is addicted to Spike as much as Spike is addicted to her. And there is a lot of mutual use going on there. He's preying on her, but she's being pretty much callous towards him too. She doesn't care that he loves her, and she tells him repeatedly, "I don't care. I'm just, getting what I want from you." And it's not until she finally faces the fact that she's doing that she can finally stand up and say, "I can't do this anymore. It's killing me." Because she realizes how much of herself she's losing in being so callous. I mean, that can't be her. It's not her. And she finally acknowledges that. It's just, they're all going through the mill. It's just so tough. I mean, and then Willow loses Tara. Tara loses Willow. Buffy loses her sense of purpose and her sense of her self-identity and is struggling to get it back. Xander doesn't seem to be losing until the very end when he loses everything. So it's a real roller coaster. And I think dealing with those themes was all part of dealing with them becoming adults. They're not in any kind of protected, they're not in college and they're not living with their parents, and there's no more protection. They are out in the world. They are responsible for themselves, and they're just, flopping all over the place as they try to do this. Yeah, they're all flailing.
Yes, they definitely are.
So it's a huge theme, I think, in this, and that's part of what makes it rough to watch, because we hate seeing them hurt, and we hate seeing them in pain, and we hate seeing them do dumb things. And we're like, don't do the dumb thing. But we all did dumb things, and that's all part of going through that phase, unfortunately. And you just hope that you didn't do the dumb things that, will have lasting horrible repercussions.
Right. So, sometimes they're not quite as intense in real life as the things that they.
Right. Well, certainly, yeah, they're going to have them be super intense here. I actually don't know anybody. I'm sure people are left at the altar. I don't personally know any, but certainly I do know people who have dealt with things like addiction and, loss in their family and having to all of a sudden be responsible for themselves and everything. There's a lot less fantasy in the fantasy show in some ways because of them dealing with these themes of adulthood, which include stuff like loss and addiction and having to just deal with that kind of thing.
Okay. Diana.
I'm going to mention the body in the room. Season 5, Joyce passed away unexpectedly. And I got the feeling after I managed to catch up and watch season 5 that it made sense. When I saw that episode, all of the mess that everyone was, it kind of clicked. It fell into place. Because really, Buffy, even though she came back and she had been in heaven, she wasn't finished mourning her mother
Right.
when she died. So she comes back from the dead and now she has to go through this again. She's still not done mourning. And now she has to mourn not only like her sacrifice was trivialized by her friends who meant well, and then she's mourning the fact that she's not in heaven, and it's compounded by the fact that she doesn't have resolution from her mother's death. Dawn's going through the same thing, and it's all like just the beginning. It's like the roots of the rest of the loss. Everybody felt it because Joyce's house was the safe house.
Mm-hmm.
Xander's house wasn't the safe house.
God, no.
No way. Absolutely not. Willow's house was the clueless house. You couldn't go there. Just no. And that was Joyce. And, she left, she made an impact and she left this crater when she was gone. And I really feel like a lot of the behavior of some, especially of Buffy, but also of, the rest of the Scoobies who've been around since the first season, it was Joyce that there's this missing piece. They needed to do everything they could to get Buffy back because they couldn't get Joyce back. They weren't able to do anything about Joyce. So I feel like that's a big source. And maybe it's part of Willow's kind of issue because she gets addicted because she's like, oh, I brought someone back from the dead. She gets a big head. It goes to her ego. And really, I think she felt at that point invincible or close to it. And she needed to complete that process so that it wouldn't happen again. So she wouldn't lose anybody else. And I feel like that factored into her addiction as much as just the nature of magic being like a drug and like a substance that is in your system. I think that psychologically it was there too. And then also for in terms of loss, like, Anya had a dream. Xander dropped the ball. But Xander also, like Carol said, he lost his grip. He was scrabbling to kind of pull himself out of a hole that his family was in. And he lost that. And he never recovered it. They never let him recover it in the whole series. And that left me very angry at the end of the series. I came from a home that was not good. And Xander kind of gave me some hope that I had a chance to kind of find a family, and then they just crashed and burned him. And I was just like, thank goodness I wasn't still in high school or like really impressionable at that point, because I was like, really, this is what they did? They didn't let this guy climb out of it? Really? Just, I don't know, maybe if they'd had a couple more seasons, they might have had him have more of a climb, but I kind of doubt it. So I think, like, yeah, everything was a mess, but and it certainly felt very real, and in some ways larger than life. But certainly, Xander and Anya's story, I wasn't left at the altar, but losing a relationship that you thought was helping you improve your situation, I've been there. And yeah, it was more dramatic, but not by a whole heck of a lot. For those
Yeah,
of you who
hopefully you
remember
didn't have
me.
demons had to contend with. It's like Xander says at one point. He asks Anya, is it something to the effect of, what made us think it was a good idea to let your demon friends and my monster of a family stay?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, that they both were in their own ways. Mark,
Like I thought,
Carol, I have to interrupt. I'm sorry. I'm getting a little message on my computer saying my Mac is going to go to sleep. So I don't have my charger, so I'm going to have to bow out now, much as I hate to, because I enjoy these so much. But I hope I'll see you
I'm
all.
sorry. I'm sorry you'll have to leave us. Thanks, Jean, and bye.
Bye. Thank you, guys. See you next
bye
week.
bye.
Bye.
Bye. All right, Marks.
Yeah, so I think, so this season's rough, as everybody's said already. I think it's because they've done a great job, season 2 through 4 or 5, I mean, a balancing between dark and light, the comedy and drama and stuff. And this season went really dark, really deep in the drama. And I think it's why it's a season I don't rewatch. I mean, I rewatch certain episodes, but I don't rewatch the overall arc very often. But with that said, rewatching it, unless, except for maybe not having Xander and Anya break up in that season, maybe give some opportunity of possibilities of good stuff. I can't really think of too much else I would have changed, because I think they did a really good job with the overall arc and storylines and everything. It felt real. If their motivations felt real, it earned, and I think they handled Willow really well, going so dark and evil. They had set everything up along the way for this to happen.
The signs were there, yeah.
Yeah, well, even in, like we said, in the musical, they gave you a lot of clues, foreshadowing for all the character arcs, mostly, of what was, in general, what was going to happen in this season down the road. So I think they handled addiction fairly well. And just like a lot of people who suffer addiction, they can't just kick it like in one season. They'll relapse if something bad happens, probably. So I do like what this show does so well is flip stuff around and stuff. So like, we've had characters die before on shows, and before and after, but very rarely have they ever died and be like, I was in heaven and now I'm really sad because that was a really great place.
Right.
And almost that's something you don't see much, but it makes sense, right? She's a hero, so of course, hopefully, she would go somewhere like that. I think like flipping the trio is comical bunch who turned so dark and murderous and rapey and everything. This was one of the first shows back then I could think of in sci-fi fantasy where they really took on the weird science fantasy kind of trope thing and was like, that's kind of rapey. You know that, right, guys? And I think that kind of resonated, for a lot of the writing since then. People like maybe think twice now when they write those kind of storylines. So they did a great job with that with Lost. It was hard. It was rough. I think Buffy, Spike, rewatching it, it's like, I think they're both taking advantage of each other at different times. And in the way with Spike, Spike doesn't have a soul, so he's got kind of a reason why he could be a little bit taking advantage sometimes. Buffy just is dealing with trauma and everything, and I think she's drawn to the hero that she sees occasionally there, Spike. I mean, there's a little bit of bad element there, or a little bit of I don't know, a dark side that she's a little bit attracted to, but also the hero that he shows himself to be occasionally. He's always been, I think he's just a little bit more, he's always been more of a lover and more poetic and stuff than Angel was, for example. Angel's always broody and stuff, and Spike's always like, I love you, let me give you bad poetry.
Right. And we will discuss that at length at Con on our Spike versus Angel panel.
We should have a contest, bad Spike poetry. People have to make up really bad poetry.
We could do it as the fundraiser.
Yeah, that'd be great.
To chip in, that would be great. Yeah.
And then the last thing, I agree with you with Xander. I'm really disappointed that it tore Xander down because they had been building up, especially I think from season 4 on. I felt like he was starting to mature and grow, and then they tore him down, and I don't think they never really recovered. Never had him kind of build himself back up, which I was really disappointed in.
I think he does a bit in season 7, though. I would
He does
I
a
would
little bit.
argue. Oh, and so we've got one of our viewers here. Vicky says that's perfect. Bad Spike poetry contest.
There you go.
Okay, I need to make a note of that, don't I? Somebody needs to remind me. Okay.
We could call it the effulgence of poetry.
Yes, well done.
And so Renita, yeah, right. And Renita says, so the Spike versus Angel panel is officially happening. The answer is yes. I am going to do that. Yes, we will definitely have that. We get another vote here from wait, I had it and then I made it go away. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. And it's going I know that what it's going to turn into, but it's mainly to study the characters. But anyway. So and I know we have lots to talk about. I still have a few more questions, so if you guys are up for it, we're going to keep going. But I do want to mention this, that on the DVD set in the special features, it was like a end of the season wrap up. They called it "Life is the Big Bad," and that was kind of the season overview thing at the end. Well, I didn't watch it because I didn't want it to give me, to any ideas that I would then get mixed up with my own, if that makes sense. But, when I was going through my notes and stuff, and for my question for you guys is that, do you feel that is an accurate depiction of who that was the big bad, that it was Life was the big bad? If it wasn't Life, what was it in season 6? And we'll make this one kind of a brief response if we can, because a couple of things won't be. Carol, we'll go with you first.
I'll say adulthood was the big bad. Adulthood reared up and smacked them all in the face. Willow is certainly a big representation of it, but I think it was the fact that all elements of childhood had ended, and they were all out in the world now, and the world was smacked them. Said, "This is what happens sometimes. You think you got it all, but."
Yeah, well, there's a line in the finale where Giles says, sometimes, being an adult, sometimes being an adult means not being afraid to ask for help when you need it. And Buffy's like, now you tell me. So,
and that was a big thing too, because Giles left, and Giles was, like Diana said, they already had lost Joyce, but then they lose Giles, and they really have nobody, and they're all kind of like rudderless. Giles was the final, element to kind of try to keep them on track. So, that was a loss too, but that happens too. You have adults who leave one way or another, and you've got to make your way. And
so we have one vote for adulthood being the big bad. Diana, what about you?
I think that it's what lies beneath. And yeah, you could interpret that as life, and you could interpret that as adulthood, but really what happened was everything that they had underneath their public faces, sort of, and their social faces, and how they were, like their masking that they did with each other and with the rest of the world, largely because supernatural is a secret in this world for the most part. I think that when the mask drops, it's what's underneath that really messed them up this time. Like, I really think Warren was always like this. And he became a horrible villain because, everyone took their masks off. Let me show them what's under mine. Bam, I'm evil. Like, and then everybody else, it's the same thing. Well, Willow, she's always felt like kind of like people thought she was a nerd. They thought she was weak. They thought she was like kind of like silly and childish and stuff when she was in high school. And now she's got this power. So she's like, oh, I'm going to use that. She flexes. And, you know, then it bites her. It comes back to bite her. So I think it happened to a lot of characters. It happened to Dawn. She's stealing stuff, you know, she's still trying to hide it, but she's trying to process her grief, and she's stealing dangerous stuff, not just a random, oh, I'm going to steal this cool looking hair clip, but I'm going to steal this forbidden item that's going to get us in trouble. Like, you know, I think it's really just these tendencies that we hide. So I think it's like what's behind your mask. I think that
Okay.
could be what it is instead of just life.
And I would like to add one question or one point that struck me too when we were talking about the addiction angle, is that Dawn's addiction to stealing, which is, you know, also something that, you know, could have spiraled into something more serious than what it did on the show. Marks, what about you? What do you think was the big bad during the season?
Yeah, definitely adulthood and having a facade, masks revealed, I guess. I mean, they say it a few times, right? Like especially trio, they yell at each other, says, "Grow up" and stuff, and you know, as they realize, you know, how dark the consequences of their actions and stuff. Or at least Jonathan does, at least. And Warren wants to be seen as a grown-up, right? Like the demons in the bar are like, oh, you're like a little kid and stuff. And this little human thinks he's so bad. Oh, you know.
Right. He's like, I'm not a kid.
Not a kid, because I did this. That makes me adult, right? And it's like, nah.
Not so much.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you know, Buffy trying to figure out, you know, what to do next with her life without her mom, and trying to raise her sister and everything, and recover from, you know, from returning from heaven, or a heavenly plane. You know, Willow, her addiction. I mean, they all have to make choices, and it is very much. I mean, the first 3 seasons, it's a lot of high school, and then we get into college, and now I feel like we're getting into being adult, because they're rarely on campus, right? It was a lot of, you know,
right. There were
gotta work a job, double meet and stuff. Which, by the way, why aren't Willow and Tara paying rent at this house? What's going on here? They're like, I don't know what you're going to do, Buffy. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, right.
No, but no, yeah, I think adulthood, and also, you know, wearing masks at times around certain people, revealing those masks, like Buffy is, you know, pretending like, oh, this what I'm doing with Spike is so bad, I can't let my friends know, and because of how they react and stuff, and Spike wants everybody to know so bad. Or even with Xander and Anya, Xander's like, no, let's not tell anybody we're going to get engaged or get married or anything. Anya's like, why not? This should be good news. Why don't you want to say this? There's a lot of secrets going on here, right? And which is what, like we talked about before, in musical dialogue so powerful at times, because they got to speak a little truth for a little while.
Right. They couldn't help themselves.
Yeah.
Anyway. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
Davior, what's it like?
Yeah, this is a good. All right, this might be heady, but it's 9:30, and hey, you know, I had a drink, so let's dive into it. Is the villain is the big bad of this season the reality you think you want? And that's a portion of adulthood, but it's like the thing that you think you want most. I don't know, because when I look at all of these characters, so many of them were reaching for something, as we've kind of been talking about, like Willow wanting the power of that magic gave her, and what that does to her, how it literally destroys her, and literally she loses Tara for a while, and it leads her to almost destroying the world. Dawn wanting to be an adult, wanting to be a part of the gang. There were so many times in this season where Dawn was like putting herself into the situations that she wasn't ready for, such as All the Ways, such as when she's like telling Clem, take me to Rack's place. I can handle it. Spike would do it. And when she goes there to Rack's place, though, Willow almost destroys her. I think the thing you think you want, so much of what Buffy was about was through seasons 1 through 5 was about, I want to live. And so much in what she wanted in season 6 was, I want to die. and so much of it. So, and with Spike, when you look at, hey, he thought he wanted Buffy, but then we've all had the conversation so far tonight about like what that relationship was, how destructive it was to the both of them when he finally was able to have Buffy. So I wonder, and of course, Xander wanted to marry Anya. We see what happened there. So I wonder if the reality of what the things that having the reality of what you think you want is kind of the big bad of the season. And again, it's a derivative of adulthood, but that's something that stood out to me.
Well, that I think that is a very good point, though, because they do all, have these pictures in their head. I mean, we all do. That's just a natural reaction. And I think that's one of the problems, that when you take what happened to Anya and Xander, I think, to be honest, I think Xander proposed kind of on, it was a very spur of the moment kind of thing, even though he, already had the ring or whatever. But I mean, it was still, because ever since he did it, he had doubts. It was obvious to see that, but he didn't have the courage to say, well, maybe we should wait a little bit. You know what I'm saying? It seemed to be that this is what you're supposed to have when you find this person you can live with. And I think that that's just an example of what you're talking about, of, that this is what I think I want, but then you find out that maybe it's not the best idea. Now, I have a question here that came to me last night when I was watching the finale. Is when it's when Buffy and Dawn are down in the underground, where there were, when they fell through the ground and there were a bunch of underground graves or something. There was that chamber, which was always kind of interesting to me. I'm not sure how that all came about, but in any case, and then they're trying to get out. And Buffy says to Dawn, I'm not going to just sit here while Willow incinerates what I've chosen to protect. Now, the reason that that's significant, and I am not making this up when I tell you that I rewound and replayed that like 4 or 5 times to make sure that I was listening correct, that I heard it correctly. I even had my hearing aid in. That she said that she has chosen, not that she had, not that I have been chosen to protect, but that I have chosen to protect. So my question to you is, how do you see that as being a significant thing for Buffy to say, for Buffy to feel, especially at this point in this season, where she's already told Giles earlier in the episode, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know why I'm back. And what's your take on that particular quote, what it must mean for her and for going forward? And Diana, you get to go first this time.
Okay, so it's like when she sacrificed herself at the end of season 5, Buffy was sure about where her place in the world was, that she was there to protect the world, and that she'd been chosen to be the Slayer, and she's like literally a chosen one. But she accepted it. She died. Then she's brought back, and she spends a lot of time during the season trying to figure out, why is she back? She saved the world already. Well, now the person who brought her back is going to destroy the world again. So this time she has to choose, and she's probably thinking to herself, there's a strong possibility I'm going to have to murder my best friend to save the world. And that is the point at which she is choosing the world. She is choosing her role as a protector of the world at all costs. She already did it twice. She died twice protecting the world. And the third time's the charm. So this is, I think, the time she's choosing it. I think that's what that means.
Okay. Marks.
Yeah, I didn't catch that line, so it's a good catch. I think that ties into, at this point, this very end of it, of her kind of coming to realization, she chooses to live and chooses to protect these people she cares about. Because in a way, like in last season 5, she chose to sacrifice her not only for the world but also for Dawn, and Dawn is there with her too, and at that time too. And I think we've seen this throughout the season. She's like, when her faith happened, she could have walked away, and she was tempted to, and even wondered if Faith would be better at it than her. But she realized that she was better Slayer, and she could choose to be the Slayer, not just be controlled by the Watchers and take a little bit of control over whether she decides to sacrifice herself or not. Anyway, I think that was probably a clue that she is what she says a little bit more in depth after that to Dawn about how she didn't want, like when Dawn's like, didn't you want to die? And she's like, no. And she's like, no, I want to, be here with you and see you grow up and fall in love and everything. So that's a good catch.
Thank you. Davior.
Yeah, I'm taking a little bit from both Diane and Mark's. I think that is the moment for us, the audience, to know that, oh yeah, Buffy's back. Mm-hmm. That, I mean, for 75%, if not more of this season, Buffy was an entirely different person who was questioning, why am I here? Do I even want to continue to be here? But I think for that line to happen in the final episode lets us know that Buffy is all the way back. She's made the choice. She's going to be the Slayer that she was before, that she's here to stay. So I think that was for us. And so I take that from both their previous points.
Okay. And Carol.
I think it's the culmination of something that we start seeing when Riley returns to Sunnydale, and she's at the nadir of her, I can't do anything, and my life is being horrible, and everything's horrible. And he reminds her of who she really is. She's not somebody who just has to smell like a fast food burger all the time and stuff. But, she has a purpose and a calling.
Yeah, she's like, you can smell it? Yeah.
Yeah. But I bathe, and then, so he plants those seeds back in her. And then 2 episodes later, we have that pivotal episode where is she in an asylum coming out of like some kind of, psychotic break, or is she in Sunnydale? And we see her going back and forth, and she at some point really is going to stay with her parents and stuff, and prepared to sacrifice her friends because she doesn't really think they're real anyway. And Willow brews her the antidote. She doesn't take it. And it's not until the end of that episode, and her mother is pleading with her to pleading with her to stay and telling her how strong she is. And in that moment, Buffy realizes, oh yeah, I am that strong, and says goodbye to her mother and commits. She chooses. That's the moment she totally chooses to recommit to life in Sunnydale as the Slayer with her friends. And, from that point on, we see her regaining herself. She's broken it off with Spike. She's doing what she has to do, but she's really reclaiming herself and her identity until it culminates in that moment where she's like, yes, this isn't forced upon me. This was my choice. And, there it is. I've chosen it. But it's a nice progression that we see starting with those catalytic moments.
Okay. Now, for our very last question, and we'll make it quick. We know we have to talk about the finale a little bit, but we've
lightning round.
What's that?
The lightning round.
Yeah, it's just because I know I've already had you guys wrapped up for an hour and a half, so I want to make sure we want to talk about it briefly. But we've talked about parts of it already, because basically the finale was 3 parts. I mean, it started with the villains episode and went on. But so just very briefly, tell me, did you, I mean, number one, do you agree that it was really a 3-part finale? And did you find it to be effective when it was done that way? Each part was also written by somebody different, which I thought was interesting. And it was the only season finale, I believe, that was not written by Joss Whedon. So that was also kind of an interesting point. But in any case, did this 3-part finale, kind of presentation work for you, the way that it was done? And Diana, I believe you're first this time.
Oh, I thought it was Mark's.
Is it Mark's?
Yeah,
Did you go first last time?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. Mark,
take it away.
Yes, I agree. It was a 3-parter. Kind of wasn't Glory, was the last season like a 2-parter, right?
Yeah.
I think I have to look back and see how that all broke out, but I think it worked out overall. This whole season, what was unique about this season compared to some of the other seasons is I felt like there were less episodes that were really standalone, like strong standalone episodes, except for the musical and a couple other ones. Everything felt like it was tied into the trio and Willow's magic diction and stuff, and
Right.
or Buffy. So it felt, unlike some of the other seasons, it felt like a longer, run soap opera type, drama kind of thing, which we get all the time now in streaming. I think it worked overall. I mean, I like how, unlike the other big bads they've had before, this big bad was sort of just to cause the real big bad, right? So that was a nice twist in a way, because I didn't really like the trio that much as a big bad, honestly. So Dark Willow made a way better big bad, and
She's been summoned again.
yes, she has better hair, way better hair than the trio guys. So it worked really well, and again, flipping the narrative, going a plot twist direction of like not the big bad or nothing really. They're just going to help create, this, plus the shock of just a handgun coming into play, and this almost never happens, and this kind of mundane murder scene, kind of happening, that is shocking.
Yeah, and one thing that struck me, and I made note of it when I was watching the beginning of the season, when Buffy goes to the bank to try to get a loan, and the guy, the loan officer, has a gun at his desk or whatever, and she sees it, and she like kind of tosses it aside, or moves it aside. I don't know if she tossed it, and she says, "Yeah, these things are really never any help." Or never any good, And I was like, and just knowing when I was rewatching it, knowing what was going to happen with a gun later on, I thought that was kind of interesting. And that was in there. They knew exactly what they were going to do. So, Davior, what about you? Did it hit on all cylinders for you?
Yes, it is. It is so damn good. All three of them back to back to back. It is so good, Carol. I almost have to tie it with The Gift. And season 5 is my favorite season, and I love that finale. But I put it on par with The Gift because I love how it's a 3-episode arc. I love how each episode ends on an amazing cliffhanger, because of course, when we're at the end of at Villains, she skins Warren alive and then sets his body on fire. At the end of 2 to Go, Giles shows up and says one of the best lines in Buffy history. I would like to test that theory.
Yeah.
And then of course Grave ends, and I know we've talked about Xander, this season, but for me, I think Xander saving the world by connecting with Willow, that works for me. And so I think for each, because of their history and because they were together before Buffy even came into this, before Giles even came into this, they were the core of this Sunnydale structure. But yeah, I think them taking the time to take 3 episodes to deal with a storyline like Dark Willow, because that's not something you can do in 1 or 2 episodes. Right. And so I just love the time that they took with that. And actually getting into season 7 later, one of my complaints about that finale is that I find it too condensed. So for that they took the time with this, I really appreciate it. I loved it.
Okay. Carol.
Yeah, the 3 episodes they just flow together. They segue beautifully into each other. And the focus grows with each of them. So the focus in the first one is just Willow focusing on Warren. And it's just them in the woods. I mean, yeah, she saves Buffy and stuff, but really the whole focus is her tracking Warren in the woods. And then the second one, she's broadened her scope. Now she's in the town and she's going after, the other two. And then by the third one, her scope is the whole world. I just knocked my microphone. Excited. Her scope is the whole world. So it keeps growing as her power grows. So does her vision and her scope. Yeah, so the line of it is just beautiful, and she has that great battle with Buffy in the magic shop, and you think what could come after that? They tore the place apart. She's had this epic battle, and you think what could even come after this? And what comes after it is actually so much smaller and quieter and more intimate because it's just Xander, and you've expanded to here, and then it narrows down to it's Willow and Xander standing in this barren place. There's two of them, and him saying I love you. It's beautifully done. It's a beautiful flow, and you don't often see that, like you say, when you have different writers and stuff, but they really just handled it all beautifully.
Yes, and here Renita says that Xander reaching and stopping Willow was one of the most surprising things to happen. Yeah, you really didn't know at the time, how his attempt was going to work. Again, going back and saying, how did it seem the first time I saw this? That kind of thing. Diana, bring us home.
Okay, so there's a couple of things about the finale. Yes, I think it was the progression of events, the pacing, the time that they took to get the different elements in. Those were all great, and I thought the dialogue was brilliant. Another thing that I really liked, and again, like I said, it's what's behind the mask is the villain, but what's behind the mask is also the savior in this finale. Because when you get down to it, what's the furthest thing underneath your mask? It's who you were when you were a little kid. It's your inner child, right? Mm-hmm. So when Xander steps up to Willow, he takes off this mask, and he's back to where he was when they were in kindergarten with broken crayons. And what else can she do but take hers off as well and be there with him in that moment? It's very poetic, and it's very cyclical, and it comes full circle with them as with their relationship as best friends, and all of this. But I do have to say, the one thing I was really disappointed about, and I've been disappointed about this stuff in so many shows, is the catalyst for all of these events. The reason that Willow has to go off the deep end is because they fridged the gays. You fridged somebody who's in a lesbian relationship in order to get there. And this was just something that was very common back then, and earlier than that too. But you have, this whole element of don't let the gays get out of control or they'll destroy the world. There's like a theme there that could be read into it. And I also feel like fridging someone's significant other is lazy writing. So I did not appreciate that, but I do very much appreciate the fact that Joss Whedon handed the writing of the last 3 episodes off to other people after doing that. And I think that's what made the finale in its 3 parts, that I agree with you, it's 3 parts finale, that made it what it is. Even though I didn't like our path there, right. Our catalyst.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Carol.
Oh no! Well, no. If you've got a point, if you want to make a point, I was going to say something else. Go ahead.
Well, it's interesting because watching it this time, I agree with the point about how having to kill the significant other is one of those tried but true to the point of kind of being stale ideas. But when this was done at that time, it was in a different place. It's like funny watching it this time around. All I could think of was Wanda. And all I can think of was a WandaVision situation where the lover dies and then the bad witch comes along to destroy everything because of the reality that she once had. So but it's interesting to hear that perspective, and now it really made it stick out, like how that trope is used so much to, like, if you need to motivate someone to the ultimate evil to try to justify it, then it's always going to be the death of a loved one.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, just from different articles I've read, from different interviews. I mean, even back then, was that the plan was always to have Willow go dark. You know, even if it was just briefly, but that this was part of the plan, and that was how they could figure how to do it. Was what would be the thing that would push her to that point. Not only, one could argue she was starting to head down that path when she decided to bring Buffy back, no matter what the cost, she was bound and determined to do it, and so she was already, she had a little bit of a head start, I guess. You could see it. But anyway, I mean, I get why it upsets people on all different kinds of levels, but that was their plan, and I guess they it worked, even though I mean, it's terrible. I loved Tara as a character, and Amber Benson is a wonderful human being. So it was sorry to.
They actually had the stablest relationship of anybody.
So I couldn't last.
Tara and Willow, they were the ones who really were working through things. And,
they did, until Willow started using magic too much, and I think there's something. Now, one thing that I want to mention, and I had it in my notes to mention this, it was even at the end, or I wanted to mention it at the very beginning when you guys were all talking about your favorite episodes or your favorite scenes. This season has one of my favorite quote, or just one of the things that I think is the most amusing of all the Buffy quotes, as funny as they are, and partly because this one does not come during a conversation, but it's in that episode Flooded, when the pipes are all breaking and stuff downstairs, and Buffy and Giles and most everybody is in the house, even if they're not in the same room, but the phone rings. And Buffy looks around and she says, "Who's calling me? Everyone I know lives here." And I have loved that quote ever since I first heard it. And I just thought that was perfect. So I just had to share that. It has nothing to do with anything else other than the fact that I love it. And to me, just represents part of, I guess, kind of my connection with the show, that you could have something that mundane be that amusing. At least to me, I'm on board. A couple of notes. We will indeed have the Spike versus Angel panel at con. So I'm looking at 3 people right here who probably want to be on it. At in-person con.
I want to be on it. I just can't be.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, you would like to, but yeah. So we will do that, and we'll have some other good stuff. But we are going to do the Buffy Horror Picture Show again this year.
Yeah,
so
that's great.
Yes. So please, anybody who's watching this, come see it. If you've seen it 100 times or never.
Carol, is it true that Marks is going to be playing Sweet this year?
No.
That's what I heard.
I don't know. We'll have to ask Anna. She's not here tonight. But she
Don't know if I can get my tap dancing shoes out.
There you go.
I got to dust them off.
That's right. Got to get them going. But I do want to thank all of you so much. I want to thank you guys for hanging in there. I think this is the longest we've gone on so far, but it is season 6, so that's the way it goes. And everybody who's watching, Renita and Vicky, who interacted with us, those of you who were watching and just enjoying, we appreciate it. Everybody who watches it later. As of right now, the date of April 27th is when our season 7 discussion should be, which seems as though, oh my gosh, it can't be the end, but it will be, and we will have another wonderful discussion. So, and Renita, we want to thank you too for always being here with us, and Vicky, thank you as well. And we appreciate you guys. Seriously, we do appreciate it. Thanks so much, all my wonderful panelists. And I will look forward to seeing all of you next month. Adios, all.
Thank you.
That's all.
Bye.